Good afternoon, and welcome to the Buyer's Choice format of our virtual GM conference and self-care summit. I'm Tom Duffy, Vice President, Member Development for GMDC Retail Tomorrow. Our learning track this afternoon is focused on a very timely and important topic, the future of the store. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our friend and moderator for today, Neil Stern, CEO of Good Food Holdings. Neil.
Welcome to the recap of A Brave New Retail World, a four-part series on retail post-COVID. I want to spend a little time today kind of taking you through the episodes that we had and looking really at what the retail world is going to look like in the future. And our job in this four-part series was to go through and reimagine, if we can, each of the big impact areas of retail. So we looked at the consumer, we looked at the impact of e-commerce, the impact of global retail, and finally what it meant to be a leader in each one of these series. Episode 1, of course, it made sense to begin with the consumer and understand the implications of retail in the future of the consumer. I was joined by my co-host, Derek Gaskins of Yesway, and it featured guest speakers from Nielsen, who kind of came in and gave us a view of the world. And essentially, we looked at disruption and said disruption in retail is moving in three key areas: extreme value, taking price to the next level; extreme convenience and removing friction from the buying process; and extreme experience, delivering an amazing engagement that creates relationships. And of course, we thought about these in the context of what it meant for COVID, and particularly what it meant to reinvent experience in a new kind of environment. As has been tradition of GMDC and Retail Tomorrow, we typically would go out and visit stores and see the market and see what's happening. Since we couldn't do that, we decided to deliver that in a virtual way. We had kind of a live interview with Arsen Arkanian, who is the CEO of Cooler Screens, kind of bringing digital technology into the retail store. We looked at Farmer's Fridge, which was a vending machine for fresh salads delivered to the consumer, as their primary places of business, offices, airports, shut down. The company quickly pivoted to delivery to keep the business going. And then we looked at an example of extreme experience, the Starbucks Reserve Roastery in Chicago, which had opened last year amid tremendous fanfare, and we showed how they've been adapting to the new environment. In episode 2, we looked at the impact of e-commerce and talked about the idea of 10 years of growth happening in 10 weeks. I was joined by my co-host Ankit Patel from Boxed, who shared their extraordinary story of growth and how they've been able to use technology as well as AI and a really just innate understanding of the consumer to deliver a unique consumer experience. And of course, we were able to measure and show the impact of e-commerce. And when we looked across all of retailing, e-commerce had grown steadily over the past decade, only to almost double in April 2020. And looking at 1/3 of US commerce was done via the internet during this period of time. And of course, we asked ourselves the question, what does it look like to have 20% e-commerce growth? We looked at South Korea, a market which is already at 20% penetration in FMCG, and kind of analyzed a bit of what the future looks like and what capabilities would be needed to support this kind of growth. As we went to episode 3, we kept our filter on the world and the global market. Joined by my co-host Maria Zorotovich from Intel, the answer was, why do we care and why should we be thinking about the global market? We asked our friends at the AbleTough Group to take us through innovations across the world in key markets: Brazil, Australia, Italy, France, and the Netherlands. And we really looked at how retailers were responding innovatively to COVID and what the future might look like. And we had an interview session with Dan O'Connor, who's the executive in residence at the Harvard Business School, to really talk about this notion about the merger of online and offline and OMO and how these two pieces come together. And we showed examples of what that might look like around the world. This is Huma, the concept in China from Alibaba, that really is a supermarket that was designed first and foremost to be an e-commerce hub and to be a dark store in essence from the beginning. And China, Korea, other markets that we looked at offered us clues as to what the future of commerce looks like. In China, 81% of the business is now done via mobile phones. And so we answer the question, why global? And finally, most importantly, as we began the episodes looking at the consumer, we ended with the notion of looking at what it means to be a leader. I was joined by Allison Castillo from Unilever, and we talked about this notion of leadership in an anxiety economy. The futurist Nancy Giordano gave a presentation, and she talked about the difference between leadership and leadering, and the differences in kind of the skill sets that we would need to thrive into the future. And as she often talked about, it wasn't about this and or that, but this and that, and how we're going to do things together. So some of the forces that Nancy talked about shaping the new economy, the digital reliance, talking about diversity, equity, and justice, balancing between the economy and the planet, and really thinking about ourselves and how we fit into the ecosystem that the companies have, and what kind of support systems are we going to need, and basically really thinking about a new model of leadership into the future. We take all that together, and some of the key takeaways that we want to leave you with in the series is that the post-COVID consumer world is forever going to be changed. Things will not go back to where they were, and that really begins with the consumer and goes through the retail cycle. E-commerce will continue to hyper accelerate. That 10 years of growth that we had in 10 weeks might mitigate a bit, but we're going to continue to grow and be important. As we think about the future, we don't always have to look in the US, we can see it around the world. And finally, and I think most importantly, in the face of this kind of uncertainty that we're going to have, we have to shift from this notion of leadership to leadering and becoming a new generation of leaders coming through. In the course of all this, we had a section called Keeping It Real. And what does this practically mean to the business? And one of the interesting things that we had through this process of having these seminars every few weeks was the progression of Amazon Fresh from an idea, as we talked about in our first session, to reality in the end. Throughout this process, Amanda Lai has been our correspondent in the field, taking us through all these concepts. Amanda, can you give us an update on what's been happening with Amazon and why it's so important to our future?
Thanks, Neil. Throughout this past year and throughout this series, Kevin Koob, Sterling Hawkins, and you and I have kept track of Amazon Fresh as it's gone from hanging up the banners to having trucks pull up and back to its recent grand opening. A lot of the concepts that we've covered this summer are personified by the Amazon Fresh concept. So let's see how they brought the concept to life. Throughout 2020, the retail industry has kept a close eye on Amazon Fresh, a new supermarket concept that combines a traditional grocery offering with Amazon's innovative technology. The first Amazon Fresh location opened up in Woodland Hills, California in mid-September, and we got an up-close look inside. The inside of the 35,000 square foot space resembles that of a traditional grocery store. There is a large produce section that offers natural and organic as well as conventional products. Digital scales throughout the department also allow you to weigh, price, and label your products so you can save time at the register. Other departments include a bakery, a serviced meat and seafood counter, and then a deli and prepared foods area called the Fresh Kitchen. There's a serviced deli counter, pizza, sandwich, sushi stations, and ready-to-heat and ready-to-eat meal solutions. All of the service counters also allow you to order ahead via the Amazon app. Within the center store, we see traditional national brands alongside the Whole Foods 365 private label, Amazon's Happy Belly private label, and their prepared foods Amazon Kitchen brand as well. There are electronic shelf tags throughout the store and Alexa technology throughout to help you with wayfinding and building your shopping list. There's a department for Amazon customer service, package returns and pickup, and also an area for Amazon devices and their top-selling products. Employees were picking orders throughout the store and also delivering curbside orders to customers' vehicles outside. Customers can also use the Amazon Dash Cart. The new smart shopping carts are lined with sensors that scan and keep track of your products as you go. The Dash Cart allows customers to weigh and price produce and also keep track of their Alexa shopping lists from the touchscreen. There are traditional checkout registers as well as a Dash Cart lane for Dash Cart users to just walk up when they're done with their shopping trips. Amazon Fresh is the latest in innovative retail concepts, and we look forward to what's to come.
Thanks, Amanda. I think the Amazon Fresh story gives us a great example of innovation in action and a lot to respond to. And I want to leave us with this quote that says, from Darwin, that says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent, it's the one most adaptable to change." I think the one thing we can take away from this 4-part series is that change is going to be a must for retailers to think about in the future. WD Partners has been thinking a lot about change, a lot about innovation, and I want to turn it over to today's presenter, Lee Peterson, who's their EVP of Thought Leadership and Marketing, to give us kind of, again, another real world example of what change will have to look like in the future for retail. With that, Lee, it's all yours.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. It would be much better to see you in person, but it is what it is, as was once famously said. So let's get going. Let's talk about consumers. So I'm going to switch to our presentation here. Bear with me 1 second, and voila. So as is readily apparent now, we're going to talk about how the store of the future is not actually a store. And, more appropriate name, but just kind of doesn't fit on here, is it's not only a store. So let's get going. So quick agenda. I'm going to talk about 2020, not ad infinitum. I'm going to talk about it briefly. I'll give you a couple of quick visuals on it. I mean, we've been living it for the past 8 months, so I don't think it's appropriate to talk about, but what I want to spend time on is what happened out of 2020 that was the upside, and then what we see as the way forward. And again, this is consumer-based on research that we just pulled in late June, analyzed in July, and we are here with it now. So 2020, in a nutshell, kind of looks like this. Reverse check mark, whatever you want to call it, but the economy went like that, jobs went like that, most stores, business went like that, foot traffic went like that. But we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about what 2020 really is. And what 2020 really is a great accelerator. So it's not a disruptor as much as it sped things up that were already happening. Good things that were really happening are now phenomenal. Bad things, even worse. So there's a couple of things that we want to talk about relevant to this presentation. Now, obviously, the list on both sides could go a lot longer than this, but e-commerce off the charts. Buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, click and collect, whatever you want to call it. Our acronym for it is BOPUS. It's really BOPAS now, but I don't think that fits so well. And delivery, like all those off the charts, basically touchless purchasing off the charts. And grocery stores, as we all know, did really, really well out of necessity. And a lot of the essentials did well as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the bad things, just in a nutshell, profits were not great, even though a lot of merchants were selling a lot more goods. They were selling it at a lower cost. Footfalls basically came to a stop in the United States, and especially in malls, which killed specialty retail, and restaurants, as we all know, took a really, really hard hit, and they still are. Thing about restaurants, though, is that you can be confident, however long this phenomenon lasts, they will be back, because people eat food and people like to go to restaurants. So not as worried about them as we are about specialty retail. That category of retail may never be the same. And just a quick graphic about store closings. It's going to be even worse than that. There's a lot of pundits that are saying 100,000 within the next couple of years. I actually think that number, given the number numbers we've blown up this category by is going to be higher than that, more like 125,000. And a lot of brands went BK, so a lot of bankruptcies. If you notice, no grocers in there to speak of. And some of these brands have been around for, like JCPenney, for 100 years. And again, the great accelerator came along. They were borderline to begin with, and then boom, goodbye. So that's happening. That's kind of the downside of it. And I pulled this Winston Churchill quote to kind of summarize 2020 because, he's one of the best people to pull quotes from. But success is not final, and I think that's a message for grocery. Failure is not fatal. That's a message to the rest of retail, and is the courage to continue that counts. And that's what we're going to talk about today: the courage to continue. So quickly, the upside, and again, the research, just the vitals were 2,500 consumers across the United States fielded towards the end of June with the same demographic match as the United States. And I pulled this quote from a medical official because you're probably tired of hearing from everybody in our industry or everybody in the retail industry. And I thought this was really apropos in that, what this guy is saying is, let's not go back to the way things were. This is a great opportunity for us to sort of recalculate where we're at and go forward. Let's think about what we're doing and let's do it better. So in terms of the upside, buy online, pick up in store, and this is a number that we just pulled, almost 2/3 of consumers have used buy online, pick up in store, at store, click and collect, whatever we want to call it, across the board in the last 3 months, 2/3. And that number is more than triple what it was just last year. And then buy online, pick up in store has always been, WD Partners has done buy online, pick up in store research for the past 6 years. And every year, including this year, it gets a top 2 box score higher than anything else in terms of digital retail integration, like endless aisle and like beacon technology and self-checkout. We listed 15 different ones. Buy online, pick up in store always scores top. And, we've had a lot of conversations like, is this going to continue? And it sure seems like that it is going to. So we also ask consumers to rate top 2 boxes. Who does it best? Who does buy online, pick up in store best? And you could see big box stores with a clear advantage, almost 50% of the 2,500 consumers, is a huge number. But that's also because they've been doing it longer. We know Walmart has been doing it for 4 years, has almost 4,000 stores up and running with buy online, pick up in store. Target has been doing a great job accelerating it to the point where they're high on the list now. Best Buy has always been in that play as well. Whereas grocery and restaurant really had to kind of band-aid things together over the course of 2020 and maybe a little bit before that and try to make things happen like as soon as possible because of consumer demand for touchless purchase. We asked about delivery, like how's delivery going? Like, are you happy with delivery in the last 3 months? Top two box scores, basically everybody. It looks like there was a couple of people that had a bad day, but basically everybody, it's good with deliveries. So again, touchless purchase, bring it to my door, let me go pick it up, have somebody else deliver it to me, huge. And we don't really see that stopping, by the way, and I'll show you a couple numbers later on that. Which of the following categories is best buying online? You see box stores, again, with a huge advantage. What surprised us a little bit was that grocery was that high, but I'll show you some secondary research because we dug into it a little bit deeper, and we did on a qualitative perspective, from a qualitative perspective too, and the answer we got is one that most grocers are not going to be that pleased with, and I'll show you in a second. The numbers here are a little bit deceiving. How do you prefer to shop? What we asked was there was 4 or 5 different ways to shop. Buy online, pick up in store, delivery, e-commerce, scan and go, things like that, or just shopping in a store. Last year, the number that we got was 25% of people said we prefer to shop in a physical space. And I got a lot of flack for that from a lot of compatriots, but I think when you take out gasoline, restaurants, and convenience stores, then this is a true number. This is what happened this year in June 2020. So that number basically doubled. The question was asked a little bit differently. We said, how are you going to shop going forward once this is over? And over half the people said not in a store going forward. So that's what I was talking about before. We see this as an indicator that there's a learned behavior now for touchless purchasing that is going to continue, and we're going to have to make that adjustment for it. And by the way, 52% is massive. So maybe 5 years ago, you had 30 people in your store. Now you're going to have 14. That's huge. And go on and on down the line. It means a lot to a lot of physical retailers. And then we asked them dark stores. Dark stores is a trend. So we asked consumers about dark stores. Which category would you shop or would you think would be okay as a dark store? And you can see everybody fared pretty well, somewhere between 35 and 50%. Restaurants at the top, a little bit of a surprise for me because that is one of the places that I still, and many people I know enjoy going to, so a dark restaurant, although, when you have food delivered and you're watching Netflix, that's also fun and a way of life now. You see groceries somewhere there in the middle, around 40%. But what was phenomenal about grocery that we're not showing here, and I'll bring up a little bit later, is we asked them on a scale of 1 through 7. These are the top 2 box percentages added up. Now, the 1 box, which would be we don't want this to happen, was the highest in grocery, a little over 25%. So what we gathered from grocery research this time around was there's a lot of people that still want to touch the strawberries and shop in a grocery store. There's also a lot of people, and it could be even the same people if you think about it, that wouldn't mind if the store was dark partially. So that tells us something, which we'll show you and get to in a second. Then to top it all off, just to make sure that we're being driven by what the consumer wants, we asked them, what about in-store experience? If you really like dark stores and you like delivery and all this stuff, what about in-store experience? Still rated very, very high. Over 50% of the people said in-store experience is paramount. And that kind of played out like this. Notice where grocery is on this. Now, restaurant, I would expect to be high. The other guys on the bottom, specialty, I would have expected to be high too. But big box stores, they wanted to see a better in-store experience from that. That's a message to big box stores, I think. And then with grocery, it's still important. Again, backing up the research that we got from the last question, it's still important for people to go through a grocery store, touch the product as a choice, not always, but as a choice. So we have to ask the question, is this the future of grocery? And this is basically a pickup store, a dark store. And we think, the answer to that question is partially yes. Partially, that's the answer. So way forward. And this is, again, consumer-based, some of our assumptions based on what we learned from consumers. But nonetheless, these answers are not just made up. So another thing I think I just have to get on the table here, or get off the table, are the table stakes. And that is e-commerce. So e-commerce second quarter this year looked like this. Triple digits from just about every company. Kroger, 127%. Big Lots, 400% increase in e-com. So consumers are definitely leaning towards that. And I think we would know that if we looked at or just consider the way that we're buying things now. But one of the things to point out there is Walmart's number, because that 100%, that 97% is a big number on a big number. And Target's is 200% big number on a big number. So that has more impact. As you know, percentages are relative. 97% is a lot bigger than Kroger's 127%, because Kroger started out much smaller. But anyway, e-com, table stakes. This is the chart that I was talking about before. So in the last 12 months, this was done by another firm there in the lower left-hand corner, and it was over 25,000 consumers across the United States. Last 12 months, who have you bought from groceries from online? And I think the scary number for traditional grocers is those top 4. So those aren't traditional grocers. Amazon being number 1 as a competitor, and I can tell you this from studying Amazon for over a decade now, this is the same thing that happened to retail. Consumers started to go to Amazon. At first, nobody paid attention. The next thing you know, that was the number 1 place to shop. If that happens to grocery, Amazon will dominate quickly. And if you also notice number 6 down there is Whole Foods, add that to Amazon, because that is Amazon. That is a big number, and they are clocking Walmart, but also Walmart, very big number. Target, Costco, Kroger is the first grocer in there, and they are by far the largest grocer, not with regular goods like Walmart has, or like the top four guys have as well. So that's something to take into consideration. We're going to have Amazon competing on this online, the way that consumers like to shop, in a big, big way. And consumers, as you can see from this, are already there. So keep that in mind. So for grocery specifically, we think that there's two things that are really important going forward. Taking into consideration everything I learned, and I just talked to you about it like on a high level, there has to be an evolution to a hybrid type of store. And I can see that now. There's a Whole Foods in my neighborhood that basically turned the front part of their store into a warehouse, much to a lot of my neighbors' chagrin, but nonetheless, they turned it into a hybrid store almost immediately, and that place is buzzing. So how do you get there? So we recommend 3 steps, and on paper, it looks like this. Step 1 is what we call table stakes. You need to be in a position, and I think a lot of grocers have done a great job of improving the brand experience over the last few years. And you have to have buy online, pick up in stores. Most grocers have, to a great extent right now. It's band-aided, and as you can see, not the preference from the numbers that we just showed you. Delivery as well is starting to happen there. We think step 2 is the next logical step to get to, and the big add-on there is a fulfillment center. And I'll talk about that when we start to lay it out and plan, but also health and wellness, because for obvious reasons, health and wellness area within grocers needs to increase to a large degree. That would be the next 2 add-ons that we see. We'll show you how to get there in a second, or what that looks like. And then from there, if you look at the future, one of the things that we think is important is app order pickup. So think of Starbucks, don't think of grab and go. But at Starbucks, you can order a coffee and you just pull up and they'll give it to you. You're done, and you drive off, or you can run in the store and grab it. Same for grocers. Need to apply this with ubiquitous technology now that Starbucks does it, anybody can do it. It's off-the-shelf technology. But for meals, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you can buy it with your app, pull up, have it put in the car, and go home. That would be a tremendous add-on for the future of grocery. And then a micro-fulfillment center, which would be more automated, but also a separation of refrigeration and center store goods. And then a center store showroom that we think is important. That would be scan and go and pick up in the store. And I'll show you all of these, and then health and wellness as well. So you ready? Here it goes, and what it looks like in design and plan. Those percentages over there are the ones that I gave you before. But I think this is what a grocery store should look like today. There needs to be a staged area. And in this case, we left the refrigeration all the way across the back wall. And we created a staged area up front in the corner, but it's walled off. And I think that's one of the mistakes that Amazon is making with Whole Foods, is it's not walled off. And it's just, you feel like instead of touching the strawberries like I talked about before, you are basically mixing in with a warehouse. You're shopping a warehouse, which is not an ideal, as we know from the numbers that we saw about customer experience, about great experience. So next phase. Here we start to add that fulfillment center. And the 40% number off to the left, we work with a consultant who opened 80 dark stores in China for Walmart, as a matter of fact. And so he had a lot of experience with that. And the numbers that he gave us was, if you get to around 35-40% of buy online, pick up in store, and with delivery, you need to take a designated part of your store, close it off, and create basically that warehouse there, separate from the shopping experience, which would make the shopping experience better and would make the fulfillment center's efficiency 10 times better as well. But you can see here, we added the showroom. We still have, if you have the showroom there, you can still buy it on the BOPUS checkout. Also, the delivery section is still there with health and wellness. So you buy it, you can pull up on the left, it'll get put into your trunk, or it'll get delivered to your house. This is the next phase, we believe, for grocery. And then the final phase, then again, this is the number that I talked about, 25%, but we would never want a dark store. So what it's going to have to come out to be is something like this. Grab and go. From the southwest corner, we see the grab and go happening on a corner or something like that, where you can just run in, run out, get your meals or get your coffee, whatever you need, as a huge add-on. Why let the coffee shops have all that business, or the the QSRs or anybody like that have that business when it could be done at a grocery store, even better. Health and wellness, center store, showroom, like we talked about. Then you see the fulfillment center being divided into a little bit more of an automation process, but refrigeration on the top and micro fulfillment center, manual perhaps to begin with on the bottom. So we measured that and listed everything that I listed to you, to the consumers, and we said, would you shop in a grocery store like that, and put it in a basic plan like this? And 80% consumers scored that in the top 2 boxes. So further proof that a hybrid is the way to go for a grocery and the grocery store of the future. So again, the grocery store of the future is not only a store, it's many things. And just to touch on a couple of things, like radius technology, we've all seen this in Grubhub or any way that you want to shop. I mean, Uber does the same type of thing, so that you could have a leaderboard in the back in your fulfillment center. This is not, rocket science at this point in time. This is something that you could buy off the shelf. We worked with Google for a while. They have it as well, hooked up to their app. Everybody has the Google app. And then speaking of apps, apps have risen like tremendously. That 63% number is a few months old, so I think it's even higher than that. Basically, anybody if they want to do buy online, pick up in store, to have them download the app is not a big request anymore. The conversion rate is twice what it used to be. And then the automation process, we pulled this number from a McKinsey number. You can see that how profit would work. We have to start thinking about automation now in some of these fulfillment centers and staging areas right away. It's going to make a huge difference in terms of profit. Like, how do you make money doing delivery, and how do you make money doing buy online, pick up in store? This is definitely one of the ways to transit into. And create a system of manual at first, micro fulfillment centers, but you can see also the increase in warehouse automation market. Again, this stuff is going to be a lot cheaper. It's going to be easier to do and to install going forward. And finally, in terms of that technology, I pulled this off of Kroger's website, and they said they were making more money on delivery by simply allowing a discount for people that shopped in stores and then not a discount for people that didn't. And I think that's just one of the ways that we have to start to think a little bit differently about how these are going to make us money and take us into the future. So some examples of the grocery store of the future could look something like this. And this is one built from scratch, because I think you'd have to handle the refrigeration in a different way than it is right now. But you've got a showroom store up in the front. You've got a fulfillment center in the back that has delivery in the top part of the back, and then buy online, pick up in store in the lower part. You can scan and go around to the side and pick it up, or you could pick it up in the front. And then if you'll notice, there's lockers in the front parking lot up here where you can have your buy online, pick up in store. If it's small enough, just pull up to that and then take off. Also, much room for community activities, for restaurants and things like that, that would make a grocery store kind of a place to go, a destination. And in an urban area, it could look more like this, where you have your fulfillment center on the left and your experience on the right, and multiple stores go a little bit more vertical. This is one of my favorite renderings that we've shown, where you have the meals on each one of these tables in the front, and the meal is outlined in the front, as we saw from a couple of grocers in Europe 2 or 3 years ago, that I have yet to see here in the United States. But here's your entire meal. Here's the goods for it. Put it in your bag and grab. So it's a grab and go almost, only make from scratch. And then, of course, the pickup center on the right. It could be a much smaller space as well. And then just a couple of examples of things that are out there now. The latest Walmart. I think H-E-B, we have to give props to H-E-B. It's probably the most innovative traditional grocer out there. And this is their fulfillment center. You can see the fulfillment center there in that curbside building that has refrigeration in it and ready to go. They are notified by technology when the consumer is within range, come out and put it in the trunk. And that is how consumers want that to happen, by the way. And then, of course, the 900-pound gorilla has been doing this for a while. Now they're doing it in Whole Foods stores. And you saw that score. They were #1 in terms of 25,000 people over the course of buying groceries online in the last 12 months. So let's not forget about them. We've got to compete with that giant. And just to close it out, 3 things to remember. Touchless is here to stay. And touchless is all those things that we talked about. People don't want to go in there and touch merchandise as much as they used to, except for grocery. every now and then, I think that that is not true. Tech enables the unthinkable. So, we can track people where they come. We can also make our systems automated in terms of the warehouse and improve profit tremendously for that. And last but not least, I would have to say, again, the store of the future is not only a store. And I'm going to close out with a quote from one of my favorite poets. The time to hesitate is through. Retailers, grocers, no time to wallow in the mire. I know that we can only lose. So thank you very much. And Neil, take it away. Thanks for the time.
Okay, and now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Neil, and I'll come back to you shortly when we're finished.
Great. Thanks, Tom. I'm excited to be hosting this panel, which is sort of the end of what's been a long series for us around the brave new retail world, which was really a 4-part series looking at the future of retail. We started with the consumer, and we ended, I think, at the right place, talking about what it means to be a leader in this world. And a lot of things happened in between. Amanda, who's been part of the series from the beginning, if I had to ask you to say, what's the one takeaway that we should all be focused on that came out of that series, what would it be?
Sure. From both the Brave New Retail World Series and Lee's great presentation from WD Partners, it's more clear than ever that both the customer of the future and the store of the future will be forever changed. I think we can all agree that 2020 has been more than any of us could have ever expected, socially, politically, economically, and from a public health standpoint with the pandemic. And just throughout this series, we've seen how the impacts on retail are going to be long lasting. E-commerce accelerated 10 years in 10 weeks. There's new expectations around safety and hygiene. And more than ever, the consumer is going to have an active voice and expect companies to do the same. And so this is really going to impact how retailers are going to approach the future, both the customer and the in-store experience. Those two things will definitely look different moving forward.
Lee, I know your firm's been doing a lot of work talking to consumers, and you referenced some of it in the video. What are the consumers telling you that, and by the way, we started this series a couple of months ago, and as Amanda said, a lot has changed even in the past few months. What are the consumers telling you now?
Well, I think that one of the things that I would have to say, and probably the biggest message, is that we have to learn how to fail faster. I just don't think we're moving at the speed of the consumer, and the consumer is letting us know, in so many different ways, either, by changing brands or to somebody that has moved quicker, or just not showing up at all and doing something different with the 900-pound gorilla. But I think the other thing is that, we've been relying way too much on an ROI model, which is not even consumer language, an ROI model. So I think we need the guts to scale as well. And by that, I mean, we work with somebody who's very large, and we talked to them about buy online, pick up in store 6 years ago. And a year after that, they came to us and said, you guys are right, let's do this. And one of their executives said to me, we're going to have 1,000 stores with buy online, pick up in store before anybody even knew what hit them. And I think that kind of got like, wow, that's really a good idea. Let's just go. We need to do more of it, more of the art to the science. So, and I think consumers are telling us like, yeah, we're ready for it. We're kind of ahead of you. So why don't you guys catch up?
Yeah. Patrick, fail faster kind of reminds me a little bit of our last session on leadership, right? And the shift in leadership. What's your big takeaway from the sessions?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Lots to digest here. And, to that point, this notion of transitioning from leadership to leadering, and Lee, this idea of fail faster. If retailers are hearing from their customers that they need to work towards a hybrid model, I would say, Neil, we got to look at this from right at the customer level granularly, and then zoom out. Okay, so we start there, we work backwards. Not rocket science. We've heard that many times. We got to start with the customer and work backwards. But in this case, given how fast things are transitioning, we got to meet them where they are, and that gets into some of what we heard from Dan O'Connor in this OMO, online meets offline. We got to meet them where they are, and then from there we've got to translate what that means for retailers and brands. So imagine what that means from an operations perspective, from a store design perspective, from company roles and responsibilities, but most importantly, company culture. How do organizations have to change to, in fact, meet the customers where they are? That's a real opportunity for us with future conversations and as we build out, the next series of Brave New Retail World.
Yeah. Hey, Lee, we showed, you mentioned the 900-pound gorilla. I'll just mention them by name, and it's a company called Amazon, right? And it's ironically through our series, we looked at Amazon Fresh from, hey, it's opening soon, to the last session, it was open, and Amanda shared her walkthrough with us. So we know what they're doing. So tell me, if I'm a competitor to them, what are the 2 to 3 things that retailers need to be doing right now? Like, let's make it real, and what do they need to do?
Well, I think they need to be a little bit more long-term thinking about sort of what I would consider classic right now: buy online, pick up in store, and delivery. They need to do it like set aside a section or create a section that's a staging area for that, instead of having the store as a warehouse, which is one of the mistakes, by the way, that Amazon is making. That the Whole Foods over here, and the whole front of the store is a warehouse. And as like the experience at Whole Foods is a big deal, but not anymore. It's a warehouse. But anyway, I think that we need to perfect that, like, is almost step one. The step two, and where we need to start to fail fast, has more to do with like a fulfillment center. How do we actually create a space for this warehouse? Stuff going in and out, people coming up and pulling up, and things going in their trunk. HEB has done a really, really great job with that. But those are the 2 things. Let's do the first thing right, and then let's start to think about how we're going to do that next thing, the next obvious thing. Because if you get to 35-40% of your business with buy online, pick up in store, and touchless stuff, you need a fulfillment center as part of your unit. So how's that going to happen?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Ocado, Tim Steiner, is the CEO, said, hey, this could be 70 to 80% of the business in the future, right? If you think about that, it just blows up your thinking. Hey, Amanda, I'll put you on the spot. As you've been to that Amazon Fresh store, what did they get right and what did they get wrong, if you're drafting off of what Lee's talking about?
Sure. Yes, having been to their new store, they're really certainly experimenting in ways that they haven't with the Whole Foods concepts and the 365 stores. Really integrating those dash carts and trying to make that experience seamless. Just bringing that just walk out technology into a more full service grocery experience. And so we can really expect to see them really try to take that on and really build more of that omni-channel experience into the stores in a way that could scale and really upend the grocery industry.
Yeah, it's and as Lee talks about the consumer's need for touchless, right? I think there's a lot of things in that experience that just start. And I think Patrick, I'm gonna let you end it, but we talked about ideal market, and we had Mark McKelsey, who was kind of there looking at the signs going up. It opened today, by the way, right? It just opened in the last couple of days. So Amazon's moving fast, and I think if I take one takeaway from Lee, it's like, man, we gotta move even faster, right? If we're even hoping to keep pace. Hey, so Patrick, when Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton, he kind of came in the second act, and he said, "What did I miss?" Right? What do we miss? Right? We try to cover a lot of the landscape. What's next? What are you going to focus on retail tomorrow that we should have on our radar?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I think from the standpoint of what we covered across this 4-part series, I think sequentially and from a content perspective made perfect sense. I think the opportunity for us moving forward, go deeper, and to continue to probe and explore these themes around, to use Lee's terms, fail fast, faster. There's a tendency within our industry, in many areas to be risk averse, or to perhaps wring our hands and worry about the pace of change. Less wringing of hands, more, come on, let's go. We got to change. We got to fail fast, faster. So I think really explore more around some of those themes in the next series.
Terrific. I want to thank the panel. Thanks for the work that everybody's done. And Tom, we'll throw it back to you.
I want to thank Neil, Amanda, Lee, and Patrick for their contribution today. It was great. They had offered us inspiring insights that are relevant for our entire community. Have a great day, stay safe, and good business.